Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I am Julie Cohen, and this is Work Life Leader Live. Thank you for joining us. Work Life Leader Live is a conversation with smart people about interesting topics on the intersection of work, life, and leadership. I am CEO of Work Life Leader. We are a leadership development, executive coaching, and training company, but this is really my side project where I get to talk with really great people. So with no further ado, I want to introduce or welcome my two compadres and very, very longtime colleagues and friends, Bill Hyman and Jane Finkel. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks,
Great to be
thanks for having us, Julie.
Great. Well, so this is only my second time that I've hosted three people at the same time, but very excited about that. Today's topic is retirement, a thing of the past, or retirement, a thing of the past. So you can decide what punctuation you want to use here. But this conversation is, the catalyst for this conversation was an article that appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer this past Sunday. We're actually all sitting very close to Philadelphia, the three of us. And this article was titled, let me get the official title, One More Run, How to Put Off Retirement and Find Another Gig You Like. This was written by journalist Eileen Rush, and it highlighted 3 or 4 professionals in their 60s and 70s who had left full-time traditional employment and started new gigs. One of those is a guest here. That's Bill Hyman. And both Jane and I and a few other career and leadership professionals were interviewed also for the article. So this has been a topic on our minds. And as we started sharing it in social media over the past few days, it seems that there's a lot of interest in this topic. So that's what we're talking about today. And so before we get into that, I wanted to welcome our viewers. So if you are here watching live, and again, it is Thursday, April 8th, around noon Eastern, please, in the chat box, whatever platform you're watching on, please say hello, let us know where you're from, and use hashtag live. We want this to be interactive. We want to get your questions and get your comments. So we'll be coming to you often for input and questions. So already we have a couple folks here. I just want to say hi to Jill Goldstone, Joel Fishbein, and someone named Mark Hyman. I don't know who that is. We're glad you're here, all of you, and we're looking forward to the conversation. So let me introduce our guests. And this I'm going to read because they have amazing backgrounds, and I want to make sure you're aware of who they are. So Bill Hyman is a seasoned HR executive and leadership coach, having worked in multiple industries, including Fortune 500, mid-sized private and nonprofit organizations, with his last role as Chief Human Resources for CDI, a leading national professional services firm. He's also an executive coach for Work Life Leader, my organization. So it's awesome that he can be here today. And he also has his own HR consulting firm. One of Bill's many claims to fame is that he was the host of Let's Talk Careers, which is a weekly radio show in Philadelphia discussing workplace issues for over 11 years. Hi, Bill.
Hey. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me back, Julie. And it's a real treat not only to be with you, but it's a real treat to be on the same panel with Jane Finkel.
I know. So that's a great segue for me to introduce Jane. Jane is a career coach, speaker, and author of the introvert's complete career guide from landing a job to surviving, thriving, and moving up. She has successfully helped clients to envision and achieve their careers that are fulfilling and personally enriching. Previously, Jane served as Associate Director of Career Services at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's been published in many leading publications, including Business Insider, The Huffington Post, and Psychology Today. So, hi, Jane.
Hi, I'm just really honored to be here with you and Bill.
Awesome. And it's mutual. So we have a lot more folks who've joined us: Allison Levine, Tom Jarrett, Mary Jean Coyle, Tim Figuera, Brian Evans, Thomas Aquilone. So I may be pronouncing your names wrong, but I love to welcome everyone. So thanks for being here. So I always like to start these conversations off with an icebreaker. And so today's icebreaker is going to be, where do you imagine your career or work life when you're 70 or 75, somewhere in that range? So Bill, why don't you start off? Tell us what you think.
So in your introduction, Julie, you had mentioned that I do work for you, and I also run my own executive leadership and HR consulting business. And I know this will come as a shock to both of you, but certainly to those who are viewing. I'm 62. I'm sure most people thought that I was at least, 35, 42. I don't see, God willing, Julie and Jane, I don't see much difference. I mean, we'll get into this later. I left a full-time demanding corporate job 2 years ago, and I will tell you, I've never been happier. So I'd love to be a guest back 15 years from now and be sharing very similar things that we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, well, let's get that on our calendars. I don't know what year that'll be. I can't do my math quick enough, but you're booked. So before I go to you, Jane, I want to ask everyone watching to think about this and please share in the comments. What do you imagine your work life, or your, and if you don't imagine work being part of your life in your 70s, we'd love to hear that too. So if you imagine, depending on your age, it could be, today, a week, a month, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 or 30 years away. What do you imagine in your, 70 to 75 range, what your work life will look like? All right, Jane, what about you?
Well, I guess I can speak from experience right now because I recently turned 70. So it's kind of a momentous period. It's actually been quite exciting and energizing, which was a surprise to me, based on all our stereotypes of aging. So I'm actually working on a succession plan. I don't plan to retire, but I am reducing my practice a little bit because I do have lots of interests. So I'm trying to find a way to balance that, but still stay, thriving in my work. And I have 2 younger women in the practice, so I'm able to refer clients to them. And I'm also enjoying mentoring them. So I'm not exactly sure how it will unfold, but I think some planning, is valuable.
Yeah, great. So you introduce a concept that I think is really important around succession planning. So we'll kind of plant that seed. So let's see. We just had someone watching. So Millie Christman. Hi, Millie. She said still adding value to businesses. So, that probably will look different to different people. And if you want to share any details, we'd love to hear what you think that might look like. And again, anyone else, please share what you imagine your work life to look like in your 70s, in your early, mid, or late 70s or beyond. Now I'll answer the question. So we actually have, and I got permission to share, well, they shared their age. So we have people in 3 different decades of their lives. So I'm 53, and the concept of succession planning, I think, is really interesting. I imagine to be fully engaged in a growth trajectory of my business, honestly, till at least 70. I mean, I have kind of a 15-year plan that is quite aggressive, but that's kind of my mindset. And I know that will probably change I'm in the next 17 years, but I see my role changing significantly during that time frame. to make sure I'm capitalizing on my, kind of on my intellectual property, and that I'm sustaining my health and wellness, which, I'm doing now and I've been doing for quite some time, but I think I'll need different sustenance, to make sure I age well and healthy. So, and then in my 70s and 80s, yeah, I just imagine being engaged fully. And, before we started this conversation, we were talking about some of the myths around aging. And I think all those myths are they're not even going to be called myths anymore, because I think a lot of people are going to be rewriting what, professionals in their 60s, 70s, and 80s look like. So that's what I'm banking on. So we got a couple other comments. So let's see. So hi, Brian. Brian Evans just retired from corporate life at 55, considering a few years of consulting work, but will definitely more life and very little work based at 70. Awesome. And so wait, let me just read a couple before I don't want to comment too much. Mary Jane Coyle, thank you. Part-time consulting and part-time babysitting grandkids. So really a nice mix of work and really important, personal values. Excellent. All right. So we're going to get started. I'm going to go to Bill, and then we're going to really mix it up. But because this conversation is based on this article, for those of you who haven't read it, really want Bill to kind of just give us the gist of the article and share a little bit about your situation, and then we're going to get to questions.
Yeah, so the gist of the article, and it's generated a lot of buzz. I don't know if the journalist Eileen Rush is on the line, but fabulous article. So it profiled 3 individuals. I was one of the 3, where each of us had decided to retire. For me, it was about 48 hours. For the other 2, it was a little longer than that. And there was a recognition that we all have different relationships with retirement. Some people can't wait to retire. But the 3 people that were profiled in the article, it was very clear that retirement was not for each of us. So my own personal story starts really back in 2016. So I had a very long, successful HR career at Lockheed Martin. But towards the end, I was on the road about 42 weeks out of the year, and I had children growing up. And I had an opportunity in 2016 to take a voluntary buyout. And although I loved my 18+ year career at Lockheed and loved working for the leaders and employees there, it was time for me to get off the road. So got a job immediately, another HR senior leadership role at CDI, as you had mentioned. Got promoted very quickly as the chief HR officer at CDI. And then CDI was acquired by a private equity firm. So in November of 2018, left CDI, and I was 60. It was the day before my 60th birthday. And I was at an inflection point. What was I going to do? And I didn't know. So I took some time off, about 2 weeks, and decided this is not for me. I have to keep busy. I have a lot more to offer. And even though I kind of sort of was looking for a job, my heart was not in it. So a few months later, set up an LLC focusing on HR consulting, executive leadership, helping both leaders and individuals help them achieve their career goals. And I will tell you, Julie and Jane, and we have both a professional and personal relationship. I have never been happier. It is so incredibly rewarding. In some ways, going back to what I loved about HR, and I think this is one of the themes that we should talk about, is often as you grow your career, the reasons you entered a career, and if you're getting promoted, you get farther and farther away from the things that you really love and enjoy doing. And now I feel that I'm doing what I really, really love, and I'd like to think that I'm somewhat good at.
That's great. Well, thanks, Bill. So Jane, I'm going to come to you in a second to maybe talk about, just if you want to just give an overview of kind of your take on the article and kind of some of your thoughts just about this time of life for professionals. So Jane, Jane was contacted in the article as a career professional, and she's also navigating this herself. So, but before I go to you, Jane, I want to reintroduce everybody. This is Work Life Leader Live, and we are talking about retirement. Is it a thing of the past? And this is, I can't remember the date, Thursday. It's Thursday, April 8th, and it is 12:45 Eastern time. So if you're watching this live, please ask questions, make comments, share your thoughts on either your thoughts about the R word, the retirement, which again, I don't like. And then if you're in an organization, if you're a leader or an HR professional or an organizational decision maker, we're going to spend some time talking about how is your organization looking at your talent, where previously you might have assumed that you're going to start, encouraging people out towards retirement when they hit their early 60s and beyond. How is your organization thinking about this when there's a lot of people who want to stay vital and vibrant and engaged well past 62 or 65? So I'm going to come back for questions and comments. Please keep them coming in. Jane?
I think that that part about succession planning, it sort of unfolds maybe day by day or week by week. I think the most important thing is that I want to be working while I'm still vital, but I also want to have a plan, if things change. But I do enjoy the fact that I do have more downtime to be creative and to do some more writing. And overall, I actually feel more energy than I felt when I was, working so many more hours. So, and it's just exciting to think how I can take some of that new free time and make some changes. I think in terms of the article, she talked about this a little bit, but in working with clients, because we're talking about all the positive impact, there are lots of people who maybe do want to work or work part-time, and it's not that easy. So I think the most important thing is finances. So people need to feel like they have enough finances to either work part-time or to, retire fully. And I think sometimes that can be challenging. The other number one, even more sometimes than finances, is healthcare. I don't think that was covered well in the article. So if someone's been working full time, they've probably gotten some support by their employer, and now they're 60, or maybe they're moving towards 70, where we know, we all do our best to stay healthy, but we know we're not quite, we know things can happen. We are definitely more fragile and vulnerable at that stage. And we know the cost of drugs. I know that there was one person interviewed, and one of the reasons he took a part-time job was to get more health care. So while I think these are wonderful opportunities, and I think there's many reasons to be encouraged and optimistic, I think there are challenges, and there certainly is a lot of ageism out in the workplace still. So that part I felt wasn't covered.
Yeah, and so that's a really interesting, oh my God, we could talk here all afternoon, but we're not, but maybe we'll have some follow-ups. The issue of ageism, I'm curious, what that looks like and how organizations will eventually change and will have to change. In that, with the demographics of organizations changing, and assuming people are going to be healthy for longer, they're not going to necessarily want to give up all that intellectual capital and organizational history and letting people go. And might there be other ways to look at or reframe your most experienced talent as opposed to your old talent? So definitely want to revisit that. So let's talk about, so the financial challenges. What do people need? Let's look at the individual side. What do people need to be thinking about? Whether they're in their 60s and they're kind of feel like that time is close, but even in their 50s and 40s, or how might people have to look at their career span differently over time? Which one of you want to dive in first?
Well, I think both of us can touch upon this.
You want to go first, Bill?
Bill.
Okay, sure. So look, it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 77. I think the first step is to really take stock in terms of what you're good at, your skills, competencies, values. What really brings you passion? What really gets you excited? Forget about the reality. I might want to be a professional baseball player. I may not have the skill, but I think the first step is to really do a self-assessment of what you enjoy doing, what you're interested in, and what brings you joy. And I don't think that matters regardless of what age you're at, especially for someone who may either voluntarily or involuntarily is leaving, has just been separated from a company. It's always a good starting point is to really do that self-assessment. And Jane brings up some good points, and I don't know if you want to piggyback at this point, Jane, but then you have to introduce the reality of that. You might be interested and passionate about certain things, but then some of that's reality component that has to factor into it. And Jane, I think you were beginning to call out some of those things.
Well, I think, self-assessment is just basic career development, and it goes on for the rest of your life. So I think that's an important point. The other thing I would sort of add practical things as you're developing your career, whether you're even 30 years old, is that continue to learn. You can't be complacent anymore, and you have to adapt to change. They say we're in the age of acceleration, and technology is driving this, and we're all sort of trying to catch our breath to stay on top of things. And being able to think about new trends and being able to bring new ideas. So keep yourself, fresh and open, whether you're 30 or 60 years old. So I think it's especially important that you look like you're on top of things especially in your 50s and 60s.
So you combine jumping off things both of you said, and I think this is relevant to everyone, regardless of where you are in your career, is your organization may not be developing you the way you need to be developed.
That's right.
And so it's important to think about investing in yourself professionally and personally, in addition to if you're working for a traditional, in a traditional role where, and again, I sell leadership development to organizations, you may need something else than what they're providing. So to be very strategic about what's important to you and how to complement that. Again, Jane built on technology. Technology is going to be changing so much that needs to be on everyone's agenda. And no longer, whether you're 50, 60, or 70, will it be acceptable to say, I'm just not into technology, or, I don't have a brain for technology, or that's not my thing. It needs to be everyone's thing, regardless of, how much you're engaged in, traditional technology. Bill, you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah,
Why don't you go?
My nonverbals are terrible. So,
yes.
So Julie, a couple of things I wanted to piggyback on. One was when you said, an employee might think that an organization is not investing in them. Look, there's no doubt no one should care more about your career than yourself. So I just want to emphasize that point, that every individual really needs to be proactively managing their career and should not look to others. The other, and again, I'm going to look at the three of us as good examples of this. No matter how early you are in your career or towards the tail of at the end of your career, you cannot emphasize enough how key relationships are throughout your professional life. And a lot of times people focus on the relationship with people up above you. And I wish someone had mentored me about this when I was earlier in my career. It's all levels. It's people above you, people below you if you're a people manager, and especially peer-to-peer relationship, right? So the three of us have known one another for 30 years. Each relationship started off professional, right? And we have maintained that professional relationship for 30 years. And it has, look, we enjoy one another, but there have definitely been professional benefit. There's been professional benefit. Jane, I really like you a lot. There's definitely been some professional benefits that have come out of this relationship. So that I think is important, going back to this topic of make sure that you're really making your relationships priority and maintain it throughout your career.
Right.
So no, I'll just say one thing, and then I'm going to come to you. So that issue of a 360 and kind of maintaining relationships. Many of you who know me know I'm pretty evangelical about this book called The 100-Year Life. And that book, really talks about longevity in your career. And there's a concept that they introduced to me that I'd never heard of before called juvenescence. And that is surrounding yourself with people and things that, as you age, keep you engaged in, current and future things, kind of keep you younger. And so I think besides the peers, Bill, staying engaged with what's happening to people who are younger than you is really critical. Mm-hmm. Jane.
I was just going to agree with Bill, but just say that I always think of people and network as the fuel that powers everything. Mm-hmm. So it is enormously important to maintain, continue to build new relationships. Mm-hmm. So it does have, I think, a major way that we succeed personally and professionally.
So I want to share. That's it's interesting. From the job search standpoint, the hidden job market, it's always about people and relationships. And so, your relationship capital is something you should be developing, if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, and throughout. So spot on there. So I want to share, we have a bunch of comments of kind of where people are, and each of their situations is a little unique. And so I want to look at some trends here though. So here's Jill Goldstone. She left corporate work at 54, just joined a startup, and now imagine she might like to consult with startups in what she's calling retirement. And then I'll just share a couple more. Mary Villa, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm sorry. 62, just left corporate America at the end of 2020. In the process of starting leadership coaching and consulting business. Hi, we can help you if you want to network with us. We've all done that. And a bit daunting and very freeing. So they're, an emotional, kind of the emotional continuum that it can feel when you're starting this new business. So what's interesting is, just these two so far, and we have more, they're both seeing, kind of one option moving to a startup, leaving and kind of doing something very different, maybe in the same industry, but moving from a traditional employer to something that maybe is higher risk. From what Jill shared. And then Mary, kind of this consulting concept. Now, the article, I believe 3 of the people they highlighted definitely moved into the consulting space. So I'm curious, what about people who don't have an interest in consulting? And because there is a lot of risk and there's a lot of, it's a very different lifestyle than going to another full-time or part-time employer. So Jane, do you have thoughts on kind of what if people, just either one of those avenues or kind of some of those distinctions?
Well, when I've worked with clients, some of them don't want a very traditional experience. They'd be happy to work at Barnes and Noble, just part-time. They love books. So sometimes it just depends when you're doing that evaluation, what are your goals at this point? I also had an experience with a client who had worked in this corporation for quite a long time and had excelled and had a lot of expertise. And she was able to negotiate with her employer to work 1 day a week because she had initiated this project. So it was reciprocal in that the employer continued to gain from her wisdom, and she obviously remained vital, contributing to the project. So I think, again, it really depends on your goals.
That's, yes, your goals, and that you have some creativity and an autonomy in potentially, proactively creating something by going to your employers. Bill, I'm curious if you would have, if you imagine back at CDI, or, I know you said they were bought out or something, but, if you could have stayed in kind of your corporate HR role with some of the, prestige and engagement that it came with it, but you could have done it for 2 days a week. Would have that changed things for you?
It may have. I probably would not have been on the show because my plan was to work full time for another 10 years, but it didn't work out that way, but it did create an opportunity. But I want to go back to something that Jane had said in terms of, yes, goals are important, no doubt. But whenever I'm working with someone who either voluntarily or involuntarily had separated from their job, and now they're, let's say, at least in their 50s, if not older, I talk about mindset. Because if you have a mindset of, well, I'm old and a potential employer is not going to be interested in me, that's going to seep through in your behavior and how you're interacting with others. So first, it really does start with self-image and perhaps negative messages that you might be sending to yourself. But I will tell you, though, and I don't want to be a Pollyanna here, because ageism is alive and real, as Jane had pointed out. But on the flip side, I can share a number of examples where people in their 50s and 60s have worked really hard and have found opportunities. And the ones I'm thinking of right now have not necessarily been career shifts, but have been in the same field they've been in for the past 20 plus years.
Yeah. Well, I have a family story of, I have an uncle in his mid 80s who is now navigated his final 3 years, and he's going to be retiring at 87. And he's vibrant, and he works full time in an academic role. I mean, he's a professor, but he is, fully engaged, and is teaching Zoom classes, to undergrads and graduates, and doing research, and that's his plan. So, I just don't think it was an option for him, or a desire to change. And so, not every organization is going to be amenable to that. He had, deep subject matter expertise, and, a huge, portfolio of credentials that the organization wanted to keep as long as possible. And so, there is some carryover that you can apply to that in your own situation. And so I agree with you. There isn't a route that you have to take. I think organizations will be evolving as much as individuals are evolving, as we look at, sustaining talent and removing age from roles. Jane, you look like you were going to add.
This is kind of a point of optimism. I attended a webinar. They were talking about how they project in the future. And they're saying that there's really going to be more opportunities for people who are doing consulting, executive coaching, and career coaching because of all the shifts that are going on. So I think, especially with some of the messages that we've gotten, there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. But the one thing is, it does require patience. It sometimes takes, a year, could be, more, to find something new. So sometimes people's expectations are, that it will happen quickly.
Right. And so with that, I think that is critical, is that one's career and the management of that is, again, not for everybody. I think it really depends on your relationship with your career. Bill mentioned earlier, I think, your relationship with retirement. I always use that term. What is your relationship with your career? Regardless of where you are in your lifespan, what are you doing to get out of it? And so as we progress, many of us, that changes, from at a certain point, it's financial security. At certain points, it might be prestige and acknowledgement and visibility. And then, many of us, it's meaning. Others, it's a means to an end. And so understanding that that's going to change over your lifespan, but the commonality is to be mindful and deliberate about it. And if you want to do something in your 60s, the day you turn 60 isn't a great time to think about it. It's really to be mindful about that. I just want to share a couple more. We've got some more stories of, Bill, do you want me to?
No, you go.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Hold that thought, because I just always want to get folks that are watching, and just to reintroduce everyone, this is Work Life Leader Live. I'm Julie Cohen, and I'm with Bill Hyman, who is an HR consultant and executive coach, and Jane Finkel, who is a career consultant and author. And we're talking about retirement, a thing of the past, or a thing of the past. I really like that distinction. And if you're watching live on April 8th, in the afternoon, early afternoon on the East Coast, and you have comments or questions, please put them in the chat boxes, regardless of what platform you're looking on. I will see them and I can share them with everyone watching and our guests. So we did have a couple more comments of people sharing kind of what their experiences are and what they want. Joel Fishbein has a long comment. I want to see if I can get the gist, Joel. Again, transition from a full-time litigation attorney to full-time mediator arbitrator. So Joel is talking about kind of staying full-time, but a role shift for, kind of moving from a current passion and creating another passion that gives him maybe what he's talking about, less demands and, and probably clears up more both physical energy and time to do other things. And again, he's expressing, as long as he's healthy in body and mind, he wants to work as long as possible. And more and more research is showing that being fully engaged with work, not just, staying engaged with hobbies and interests, but actually working and how that uses your brain definitely helps extend that wellness and longevity. So Bill, I think did you have a comment?
I did.
That you wanted to, so why don't you build on that and then I'll go to you, Jane. Go ahead, Bill.
I wanted to introduce to the conversation as relates to career management, and this has become more and more popular with the 50 plus crowd, is portfolio management. And some of our listeners may be familiar with this concept, but portfolio management means, so again, starts with what are you good at? What are your skills, and what would other people potentially see value and buy that type of service or product? But portfolio management is doing perhaps multiple things. Some of it could be doing some of those services on your own, could be partnering with other organizations. So like myself, I'll use myself as an example of that. I have a portfolio management. Some of the work I do, you had mentioned, Julie, I do some work for you. So I partner with organizations like you and others, but then I have my own independent business. And that's become very, very popular for people 50s and the 60s. But again, it's limited because obviously you have to have some sort of service that you're able to sell to others.
Great. Jane?
So I was thinking about Joel's comments and something that Julie was talking about, planning in advance. So for example, he's interested in mediation. So are there some things now that he could be doing, whether there's a professional association or maybe he can do it pro bono on the side? But I think sometimes if you do have an idea, you don't have to wait till you turn 60 or 70. There are ways that you can either learn, maybe there's a certificate, you take a course, or you get some volunteer experience, but there actually are some really interesting ways that you can get that stimulation now.
Yes. Go ahead, Bill.
And Joel, and I think Joel is a really good role model. What he just did, he put it out there. Now, Joel is very transparent. He's telling a lot of people right now, this is my interest. So don't assume people know either A, what your skills are, or B, your career goals. So Joel, I compliment you in such a public way. You're putting it out there, and hopefully people will say, hey, I might be able to help you, Joel Fishbein.
Yeah. Well, actually, someone did. Brian Evans said, or at least commented. He said, Brian, in response to Joel's comment, said, I have considered the mediator role as well. Seems like it'd be very flexible, yet fulfilling and challenging work. So the two of you should get together because maybe there'll be Evans and Fishbein mediating firm. Okay. We've just made a match if you don't already know each other. Okay. All right. So we have a question, and Jane, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to throw this to you because I know, Bill, you'll have thoughts on this. First of all, hello, John Vance. It's nice to see your name, and I'm glad you're watching. So John Vance is asking, but if you are already 60 plus, presumably it's still not too late to reinvent oneself, especially if there is an idea of what the post-corporate ideal may include, even if it's not fully thought out. So I'm going to throw that to you, Jane. Your thoughts on that?
Well, of course. I mean, we can reinvent ourselves if we're 80 years old. It's an ongoing life process. So again, it's probably going to be a repetition of what we've talked about. it's about stepping back, taking a deep breath. Who am I? What am I good at? What have I developed expertise at? What are my accomplishments? But I also think about, what are you curious about related to work, outside of work? What really interests you? And some people might call that a passion, but what is it that makes you feel alive? Things that you do, outside of work, or things that you think about. And then I think it's not just about waking up and figuring it out. It just doesn't happen like that. It might require a lot of research, talking to people. Maybe you have a big idea, but it needs to be broken down, but you have conversations with people. There's plenty of information online and through associations. So, you do have to do what I would refer to as your market research to see what's out there and what's really viable. But certainly, we can all reinvent ourselves. And there might be we have to accept there may be limitations, but there's no reason why, there's some interesting way to reinvent yourself.
Right. So John, I'll put this out here, and we'll come back if you're here live and you want to comment. I'm curious if there is an idea percolating for you. I'm aware of your, some of your history, because our paths crossed many years ago professionally. But I'm curious if there is an idea percolating. I think Jane mentioned passion and looking at that. That's great, and it can also be you have, that your passion is, starting a new business, or your passion is, getting back and working in another organization in a different capacity. And so I just like people to remember, you get to create the story, and then you test it out to see if you can craft that. Right. And as our world, as our population is getting older and living longer, there's going to be more and more needs for a lot of things that just aren't around today. So if you want to share that, John, we'd love to hear that. I do want to share Joel Fishbein's response. This is great. This is exactly what we want. He's doing a ton of volunteer meditation work, and he looked into certification just yesterday. And so this is, I think, a perfect example of that issue of you might have to invest in yourself, even if you work at a firm, but you're in a certain area of expertise, and you can't necessarily make a business case for your organization to fund, a week-long class at Harvard Law School. It may be worth the investment now while you're earning revenue full time to invest now, as opposed to, maybe 5 years if you're no longer there, and then you've already decided to switch things up. So I think that's a perfect example. Jane, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I just think it's terrific what he's doing, and in this process, he's making all these contacts so that when he's ready to move forward with that, there's several people that he can talk with. They have opportunities or know about opportunities. So it's terrific.
Yeah, and so we're actually, it's interesting. We're actually going to be coming to the close in the next 5 or so minutes. But so there's just a couple other things I want to. There's another comment that I think leads to another issue. Here's someone at 50, corporate job ended, would like to do something more impactful in the mental health space with more work-life balance. Keep working out of passion, not necessity. I do worry about getting hired over 50. Even with 15 years of HR. Now, so we commented on a bunch of this stuff around kind of your story and kind of, that, ageism, and yet how you need to kind of show up differently with kind of your skills, and that organizations are likely to be, more open to people as they're aging than they might have been, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But, Stephanie talks here about, shift it, from corporate restaurant job to mental health space. That might be a big leap for her. Or so I just want to maybe throw that topic out of what if you do want to completely, do something like that. Jane, you were going to comment on that.
I do know a lot about mental health opportunities, and it is one area that is less ageist than others, because people are at all different ages who have all different problems. But it probably would require more education. So it might require a counseling degree, or if she wanted to do coaching, obviously she could get a coaching certificate too.
Right.
But, that is sometimes the issue if you want to make a complete shift like that you may have to get some additional education or training.
Right, right.
And if I could just piggyback, Julie, and also too, to make sure you're doing your due diligence, that what might seem attractive in terms of a position, do you really understand and have an appreciation of what someone does in that profession? So to try to identify people who are doing the type of jobs we want to transition into, have an informational interview, really gather data and facts and learn more about what you might want to transition into.
Yeah. And I think what you're highlighting there, when Bill talks about informational interviews and Jane talks about, research and, the importance of your network, that's important for your job and careers throughout your life. I mean, that doesn't go away. And so really, again, if you're 30, 40, 50, the relationships that you make are really important. And, investing in connections and staying connected with people is really, is good business. It's good career management. It's good leadership too. If you're in a role, internal to an organization also. So that story and those skills stay with you throughout. This will be the last comment I'm going to share because so we get the full story of John Vance. So he wants to thank you and some real interesting things, growing and making something, cider, brewing, or do something with his wife, a gentleman's farm concept in New York State. Wow. I want to follow up and hear more about that because I don't know what a gentleman's farm is, but I will surely check that out. So as we're about to wrap up in the next few minutes, I do want to get your final thoughts. This last part I call kind of the big rocks, like what. And Jane, I'll go with you first if you're game. So if we go back to our topic, if we're examining. And I actually am going to do another show about this, about like a new word for retirement. Like I think it is going to be a thing of the past. So I'm coming down on an exclamation point. Retirement is a thing of the past, and I actually want to rebrand that. And I know there's the terms encore careers and other things, but that none of those words sit with me. Like there's a new word that I still haven't figured out. But what are your thoughts for people? Regardless of where they are, or just if there's something, a couple key points that you want people to walk away with from today's conversation, Jane?
I think just that there's a choice. So some people do want to retire fully, depart from work, and that's perfectly fine. And they still do really, interesting and fascinating things. And for those I'm sure most of the people here that are listening today are thinking about, actually continuing to work. And I think it's an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a setback or, something to be afraid of. And yet it does take some time and it does take some energy to really carefully evaluate, who you are and what the opportunities out there. And you have to adjust to the fact that things keep changing. So how you thought they were, 5 years ago, they're not today. And I just think it's not always easy, but it's really important to be optimistic.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Bill, what about you? Big rocks, final things you want people to take away.
And one was what Jane just ended with was optimism. Often when I'm working with someone who's looking to make a career change, you can come up with lots of reasons why a potential employer or you want to start on your business, all the reasons why you can't. I have too much experience. I have too little experience. And the list goes on. And optimism is the right word, is that, there are strategies. You can't be naive, but there are strategies to really try to face those challenges head on. The second big rock, I think we've talked from beginning to end about the importance of relationship management. So Julie, you've mentioned the 100-year life. So some of you who know me well, one of my big fans is Adam Grant, and he's written a book on this called Give and Take. And I'd really recommend for those who want to learn more about the importance of relationship and how relationships should be mutually beneficial, I'd highly recommend that book.
Great, great. So for me, there's I'm kind of with two of the best in the career space. So I don't have that much to add, but for those of you who know me, I will always say something, right? No, just kidding. Again, to me, I think it's about your story, and this is as you navigate. Is we need to rewrite stories and some of these myths that some of us might still be holding on because maybe you already are in your 60s or 70s and you think work was supposed to be some way, and that's a thing of the past. And I think it's really important to think about how you want to be in this place. It may not look exactly like how you want it, and there are tools, resources, networks, relationships that can support you in doing that. So it's your story to create, again, pulling in that optimism that Jane so eloquently mentioned. So with that, I want to, before we wrap up, I want each of you to be able to say, how can people get in touch with you if they want to continue this conversation? Jane, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, it's pretty easy. My website is janefinkel, one word.com, and I spell my name. The last name is Finkle. So it's janefinkel, one word.com.
Great. Thank you, Jane. And Bill, what about you? How can people get in touch with you?
So unlike Jane, I make it really difficult. So my website address is Julie, you don't have to agree that readily, is pretty long. So my website address is wahrconsultingservices.com.
So we'll put that in our comment section. We'll put both of those websites in our comments because it might be a little difficult to remember that one. And so there's a couple final comments I have for everyone. There's a couple other comments we didn't get to, and so I will be revisiting all of them and commenting. We also didn't get to looking at retirement from the organization standpoint and things organizations need to be thinking about, and kind of looking at leadership within organizations as leaders start aging, and how to retain all that intellectual capital. So I will have another topic, another Work-Life Leader Live on that shortly. Fortunately, this is growing. We have two sessions scheduled next week. One, we're going to be talking about high potential talent, and I think we're going to call it a go-go or a no-no. And then we're going to be talking about kind of work-life integration, work-life balance in the middle of the pandemic and how to navigate that. And then we even have something coming up on talent optimization and what that is and how that looks like. And final, before we say goodbye, anyone who's listening, I know we have a lot of great HR leaders who are here on. If you have an idea and you think you should be a guest and have a conversation with me on Work-Life Leader Live, send me a message and pitch me, because I'm always looking to talk with smart people about interesting topics on the intersection of work, life, and leadership. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jade and Bill.
Thank you.